November 1942, the sands of El Alamein stretch endlessly under a merciless sun. General Erwin Rommel stands atop his command vehicle, binoculars pressed against his eyes, watching British tanks advance in overwhelming numbers across the desert horizon. His Afrika Korps, once the terror of North Africa, now faces annihilation. Fuel tanks run empty, ammunition dumps lie bare, and reinforcements that Berlin promised will never arrive. Behind him, the entire Axis position in North Africa crumbles. Before him, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's 8th Army advances with methodical precision. For the first time in his legendary career, Rommel must do the unthinkable, order a retreat. The man who had driven the British back to the gates of Egypt, who had earned Churchill's reluctant admiration, now watches his dream of capturing the Suez Canal evaporate in the desert heat. But who was Erwin Rommel really? How did a schoolteacher's son become Hitler's favorite general? What made him a legend even among his enemies? And why did the Third Reich force him to take his own life in October 1944? Erwin Johannes Eugen Rommel was born on November 15, 1891, in Heidenheim, a small town in southern Germany. Unlike many German officers who came from aristocratic Prussian military dynasties, Rommel's origins were solidly middle class. His father served as a schoolteacher and later a headmaster, instilling in young Erwin a respect for education and discipline. His mother came from a family of civil servants, representing the respectable bourgeoisie of Imperial Germany. As a youth, Rommel showed little indication of future military greatness. He was a quiet, somewhat frail boy who preferred mathematics and engineering to physical pursuits. His father initially hoped he would follow the family tradition and become a teacher or engineer. However, at age 18, Rommel made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He applied to join the army. In July 1910, Rommel enlisted as an officer cadet in the 124th Württemberg Infantry Regiment. Unlike the elite Prussian Guard regiments that attracted aristocratic sons, the Württemberg Regiment recruited from southern Germany's middle classes. This environment suited Rommel's personality perfectly. He was methodical, hardworking, and determined to prove himself through merit rather than social connections. At the military academy in Danzig, Rommel distinguished himself through dedication rather than brilliance. His instructors noted his practical approach to military problems and his ability to remain calm under pressure. He particularly excelled in field exercises, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of terrain and movement. In 1912, he graduated and received his commission as a lieutenant. These early years shaped fundamental aspects of Rommel's military philosophy. He learned to value initiative over rigid adherence to doctrine, speed over deliberate planning, and leading from the front over commanding from headquarters. These principles would define his entire career. When World War I erupted in August 1914, Lieutenant Rommel eagerly joined his regiment at the front. Unlike many officers who spent the war in staff positions, Rommel saw intensive combat from the very beginning. He fought in France, Romania, and Italy, accumulating a record of bravery that would earn him Germany's highest military decoration. In the opening months of the war, Rommel led his platoon in battles through the Argonne Forest in France. On August 22, 1914, during an engagement near Bled, Rommel demonstrated the aggressive tactics that would become his trademark. Leading a reconnaissance patrol, he encountered French positions and, rather than retreating to report, immediately attacked with his small force. The surprise assault routed a much larger French unit, earning Rommel his first Iron Cross. Throughout 1915 and 1916, Rommel continued to distinguish himself in trench warfare on the Western Front. He received multiple wounds, but always returned to combat as soon as possible. His superiors recognized his talent for small unit tactics and his ability to exploit enemy weaknesses quickly. In September 1915, he was promoted to Oberleutnant and given command of a company. However, Rommel's true moment of glory came in 1917 during the Italian campaign. The German army sent reinforcements to support their Austrian allies against Italy. Rommel, now commanding a mountain battalion, participated in the Battle of Caporetto, one of the most devastating defeats in Italian military history. On October 24, 1917, Austro-German forces launched their offensive. Rommel's battalion formed part of the specialized Alpine troops tasked with penetrating the mountainous Italian defenses. What followed demonstrated Rommel's genius for maneuver warfare. Rather than following the planned routes, Rommel identified weakly defended mountain passes and led his men through terrain the Italians considered impassable. For 3 days, Rommel's battalion advanced deep behind Italian lines, sowing confusion and panic. At Monte Matager, Rommel achieved the impossible. With just 150 men, he captured an entire Italian regiment of over 1,500 soldiers. He accomplished this through audacity and deception, convincing the Italians they were surrounded by overwhelming German forces. By the time the offensive concluded, Rommel's battalion had captured 9,000 Italian soldiers and 81 artillery pieces while suffering minimal casualties. For this extraordinary achievement, Rommel received the Pour le Mérite, Imperial Germany's highest military honor. At 27 years old, he had become one of the youngest recipients of this prestigious decoration. The lessons Rommel learned at Caporetto would influence his entire military career. He discovered that speed, surprise, and bold leadership could overcome numerical inferiority. He learned that appearing where the enemy least expected could create disproportionate psychological effects. Most importantly, he internalized the principle that commanders should lead from the front, personally reconnoitering and making rapid decisions based on direct observation. After Germany's defeat in 1918, Rommel faced the uncertain future confronting all professional soldiers. The Treaty of Versailles reduced the German army to just 100,000 men. Rommel, fortunate to retain his commission, spent the interwar years in various infantry positions. These were quiet years of garrison duty, training exercises, and slow promotion. During the 1920s and early 1930s, Rommel served as a company commander and then as an instructor at the Dresden Infantry School. It was during this period that he wrote Infantry Attacks, a tactical manual based on his World War I experiences. Published in 1937, the book became required reading in military academies worldwide, including at West Point in the United States. Infantry Attacks revealed Rommel's military philosophy clearly. He emphasized the importance of reconnaissance, the value of surprise, and the necessity of maintaining offensive momentum. He argued that commanders should be physically present at critical points, making decisions based on first-hand observation rather than reports from subordinates. The book also showcased Rommel's ability to analyze his own mistakes honestly, demonstrating a capacity for self-reflection rare among military officers. Hitler's rise to power in 1933 transformed Germany's military landscape. The new regime began massive rearmament, creating opportunities for ambitious officers. Rommel, though not a Nazi Party member, recognized that the new government offered chances for advancement. In 1935, he became an instructor at the Potsdam War Academy, a prestigious position that brought him to the attention of senior Nazi leaders. In 1938, a pivotal moment occurred in Rommel's career. Hitler personally selected him to command the Führer's military escort battalion during the occupation of the Sudetenland and later during the annexation of Czechoslovakia. This assignment brought Rommel into direct contact with Hitler and other top Nazi officials. Hitler, who had read Infantry Attacks, was impressed by Rommel's tactical thinking and his demonstrated courage in World War I. Unlike many traditional Prussian officers who viewed Hitler with aristocratic disdain, Rommel felt genuine admiration for the Führer. This relationship would prove both beneficial and ultimately tragic. Hitler saw in Rommel a reflection of his own narrative, a common man who rose through merit rather than privilege. Rommel saw in Hitler the leader who could restore Germany's military greatness. When World War II began in September 1939, Rommel commanded Hitler's headquarters security but desperately wanted a combat assignment. He persistently lobbied for command of a panzer division, despite having no experience with armored warfare. His reputation, combined with Hitler's favor, overcame the objections of armor specialists who felt the position should go to someone with tank experience. In February 1940, Rommel received command of the 7th Panzer Division. He had less than 3 months to prepare for the coming offensive against France. Characteristically, Rommel threw himself into mastering his new command. He studied tank tactics intensively, conducted relentless training exercises, and personally inspected every aspect of his division's readiness. On May 10, 1940, Germany launched its Western offensive. Rommel's 7th Panzer Division formed part of Army Group A, which would execute the crucial breakthrough through the Ardennes forest. What followed would make Rommel's name legendary throughout Europe. The 7th Panzer Division advanced with such speed that it earned the nickname Ghost Division. Rommel personally led from the front, often in the first vehicles of the advancing columns. He violated conventional doctrine by pushing forward without waiting for infantry support or securing his flanks. This aggressive approach created chaos in French command structures, which couldn't respond to the rapidly changing situation. On May 13, Rommel's division reached the Meuse River at Dinant. Rather than waiting for pontoon bridges, Rommel ordered an immediate crossing using whatever boats his engineers could find. Under heavy fire, his troops established a bridgehead. Rommel himself crossed with the first wave, directing operations from the front line while French artillery shells exploded around him. Once across the Meuse, Rommel unleashed his division in a relentless advance westward. For the next 2 weeks, the 7th Panzer Division covered over 200 miles, constantly moving, constantly attacking. French units attempting to establish defensive lines found Rommel's tanks already in their rear areas before positions could be prepared. At Arras on May 21, Rommel faced a serious British counterattack. 2 tank battalions, supported by infantry, struck his exposed southern flank. For several hours, the outcome hung in balance. Rommel personally organized the defense, moving between threatened sectors, positioning anti-aircraft guns in anti-tank roles, and rallying his troops. The British attack was repulsed, but it gave Rommel a newfound respect for British fighting qualities. By early June, Rommel's division had reached the English Channel, helping to complete the encirclement of Allied forces at Dunkirk. During the final phase of the French campaign, the 7th Panzer Division drove deep into France, capturing the port city of Cherbourg on June 19. Throughout the campaign, Rommel's division had covered more ground and captured more prisoners than any other German division. The French campaign established Rommel's reputation for lightning warfare. His ability to maintain relentless pressure, his personal leadership under fire, and his knack for appearing where least expected made him a rising star in the Wehrmacht. Hitler personally decorated Rommel with the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, cementing their relationship. In February 1941, Rommel received a new assignment that would define his legacy: command of German forces being sent to North Africa to support Italy's faltering campaign against the British. Officially designated the Deutsches Afrika Korps, this force initially consisted of only 2 divisions. Rommel arrived in Tripoli on February 12, 1941, and immediately began planning offensive operations despite orders to remain on the defensive. North Africa presented unique challenges. The vast desert spaces bore little resemblance to European battlefields. Water, fuel, and supplies all had to be transported over enormous distances. The climate was punishing, with temperatures exceeding 120 degrees Fahrenheit during the day and dropping near freezing at night. Sandstorms could reduce visibility to 0 and clog engines and weapons. Rommel adapted brilliantly to desert warfare. He recognized that the open terrain favored mobile operations and that controlling key positions like coastal roads and water sources could determine entire campaigns. He also understood that in the desert, victory depended on logistics. The side that could maintain fuel and ammunition supplies to forward units would prevail. Despite explicit orders from German high command to wait for reinforcements, Rommel launched his first offensive on March 24, 1941. With characteristic audacity, he attacked British positions at El Agheila with forces that were still arriving and organizing. The British, caught off guard by German aggression so soon after their arrival, began retreating. What started as a limited attack transformed into a full-scale offensive. Rommel pursued the British relentlessly across Cyrenaica, recapturing all the territory Italy had lost. His forces moved with such speed that British commanders couldn't establish stable defensive lines. By mid-April, Rommel had pushed the British back to the Egyptian border, besieging the port of Tobruk. This remarkable offensive made Rommel an international celebrity. British newspapers dubbed him the Desert Fox, a nickname that captured both admiration and frustration. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, even while British forces retreated, spoke of Rommel with grudging respect, calling him a very daring and skillful opponent. The next 18 months saw a campaign of dramatic swings. Rommel would advance, outrun his supply lines, then be forced to retreat when British counteroffensives exploited his logistical vulnerability. He would fall back, shorten his supply lines, then attack again when British forces became overextended. This back and forth across the North African desert created a unique form of warfare that emphasized maneuver over position. Several factors made Rommel particularly effective in North Africa. First, he led from the front, personally conducting reconnaissance in advance of his main forces. This gave him real-time intelligence that allowed rapid decision-making. Second, he mastered the art of deception, using fake tanks and dummy supply dumps to confuse British intelligence about his true strength and intentions. Third, he employed his forces flexibly, switching between offense and defense with bewildering speed. Rommel's tactical innovations in the desert became textbook examples. He pioneered the use of anti-tank guns in mobile warfare, positioning them in ambush while his tanks drew British armor into killing zones. He perfected the technique of the fighting withdrawal, inflicting maximum casualties while preserving his own forces. He also demonstrated brilliant use of terrain, even in the seemingly featureless desert, positioning forces on slight ridges that provided crucial fields of fire. However, Rommel also made significant mistakes. His siege of Tobruk consumed resources and tied down troops that could have been used elsewhere. His tendency to outrun his supply lines repeatedly forced retreats just when victory seemed within reach. Most critically, he never fully appreciated the intelligence advantage the British gained from Ultra, the secret decryption of German codes that revealed his plans and supply situation. In January 1942, Rommel launched another offensive, pushing the British back toward Egypt. By June, he had finally captured Tobruk, a victory that earned him promotion to Field Marshal, making him the youngest in the Wehrmacht at age 50. With Tobruk secured, Rommel pressed toward the ultimate prize, the Suez Canal and the oil fields of the Middle East. The First Battle of El Alamein in July 1942 stopped Rommel's advance just 66 miles from Alexandria. British forces, now under General Claude Auchinleck, had finally established a defensive position that couldn't be outflanked. The Mediterranean Sea anchored the northern flank, while the impassable Qattara Depression secured the southern flank. Rommel attacked repeatedly but couldn't break through. For the first time, his tactical wizardry found itself neutralized by geography and determined defense. Worse still, Rommel's health deteriorated under the desert's harsh conditions. He suffered from jaundice, desert sores, and chronic stomach ailments. The physical and mental strain of commanding in such an unforgiving environment while perpetually short of supplies took its toll. In September 1942, he returned to Germany on sick leave. During Rommel's absence, the situation in North Africa changed dramatically. A new British commander, General Bernard Montgomery, took control of the Eighth Army. Unlike his predecessors, Montgomery refused to be rushed into premature offensives. Instead, he methodically built up overwhelming superiority in men, tanks, artillery, and supplies. He also reformed British tactics, learning from Rommel's methods. Rommel returned to North Africa in late October 1942, just as Montgomery launched the Second Battle of El Alamein. What followed was a 12-day battle of attrition that Rommel could not win. Montgomery attacked with 1,000 tanks against Rommel's 500, many of which lacked fuel. British artillery fired over 1 million shells in the opening bombardment. The RAF dominated the skis, while Rommel's Luftwaffe support remained minimal. Rommel fought skillfully, conducting a masterful defensive battle that inflicted heavy casualties on British forces. But he lacked the resources to counterattack effectively. His tanks ran out of fuel. His ammunition ran low. Reinforcements promised by Hitler never materialized. On November 2, facing annihilation, Rommel ordered a retreat despite Hitler's explicit order to stand fast. The retreat from El Alamein became one of the longest in military history. Rommel conducted a fighting withdrawal across 1,400 miles, from Egypt through Libya to Tunisia. He preserved much of his army despite relentless British pursuit and Allied air superiority. This retreat demonstrated Rommel's defensive skills as surely as his offensives had shown his attacking prowess. However, the strategic situation was hopeless. In November 1942, American and British forces landed in French North Africa through Operation Torch. Rommel now faced enemies from both east and west. The Afrika Korps was trapped in Tunisia with no hope of evacuation. In March 1943, Rommel was recalled to Germany, officially for health reasons. He had led German forces in Africa for over 2 years, becoming the most famous German general of World War II, but his greatest campaigns were behind him. After North Africa, Rommel received command of Army Group B in northern Italy, then transferred to France in late 1943 to strengthen coastal defenses against the expected Allied invasion. He inspected the Atlantic Wall extensively, concluding that the existing fortifications were inadequate. He advocated for placing strong armored reserves near the beaches to destroy any invasion force before it could establish a beachhead. This strategic approach conflicted with other German commanders who preferred keeping armor in central reserves to counterattack after determining the main invasion point. The resulting compromise satisfied no one and contributed to German confusion when the Allies landed in Normandy on June 6, 1944. Rommel was in Germany visiting his wife on her birthday when D-Day began. By the time he returned to his headquarters, the Allies had established their beachhead. Over the following weeks, Rommel witnessed the overwhelming material superiority of the Allied forces. Their air power prevented daylight movement. Their artillery and naval gunfire destroyed German positions. Their reinforcements arrived faster than German units could move up to confront them. For the first time, Rommel began to question Germany's ability to win the war. He recognized that defeat was inevitable unless Germany could negotiate peace on the best terms possible. This realization put him in contact with German officers plotting to remove Hitler from power. Rommel's exact involvement in the July 20, 1944 assassination plot against Hitler remains debated by historians. He clearly knew of the conspiracy and expressed sympathy with its goals. Whether he actively participated in planning or merely gave tacit approval is unclear. What is certain is that the plotters considered Rommel essential to their plans because of his popularity with the German people and armed forces. The plot failed. Hitler survived the bomb blast, and the subsequent investigation revealed the conspiracy's scope. Rommel's name appeared in testimony from arrested conspirators. On July 17, 1944, before the investigation reached him, Rommel's staff car was strafed by British fighters. Severely injured with a fractured skull and other wounds, Rommel was hospitalized and effectively removed from command. As Rommel recovered in his home, the investigation closed in. Hitler faced a dilemma. Rommel was a national hero. A public trial would be embarrassing and might create a martyr. Hitler chose a different solution. On October 14, 1944, two generals visited Rommel at his home. They presented him with a choice: face trial for treason, with guaranteed execution and reprisals against his family, or take poison and receive a state funeral with full honors and protection for his family. Rommel was given 15 minutes to decide. He chose the poison. He said goodbye to his wife and son, telling them he would be dead in 15 minutes. He climbed into the general's car and was driven a short distance away. The cyanide acted quickly. The official announcement stated that Field Marshal Rommel had died from complications of his injuries. Germany gave Rommel a hero's funeral. Hitler sent a wreath. The truth of his forced suicide remained hidden until after the war. Rommel was buried with full military honors, his reputation intact. The legacy of Erwin Rommel remains complex and controversial. As a military commander, his tactical brilliance is undeniable. His campaigns in France and North Africa demonstrated mastery of mobile warfare. He possessed an intuitive understanding of terrain and timing that allowed him to achieve victories against superior forces. His personal courage and leadership from the front inspired fierce loyalty from his troops. However, Rommel's strategic limitations were equally apparent. He repeatedly ignored logistical constraints, launching offensives that couldn't be sustained. He never commanded forces larger than 2 or 3 divisions effectively. His focus on tactical success often came at the expense of broader strategic considerations. His relationship with Hitler, while personally beneficial, tied him to a criminal regime. The Rommel myth that developed after the war portrayed him as the good German, a professional soldier who fought cleanly and eventually turned against Hitler. This narrative, encouraged by both former German officers and Allied powers during the Cold War, simplified a more complicated reality. Rommel served the Nazi regime loyally for years. His forces in North Africa committed war crimes, including the shooting of prisoners and Jewish soldiers. His opposition to Hitler came very late and remained ambiguous in its commitment. Yet Rommel genuinely earned respect from his enemies. British and American officers studied his tactics. Montgomery, despite defeating him, acknowledged his skill. Captured British officers reported being treated with respect by the Afrika Korps, in marked contrast to German conduct on the Eastern Front. This reputation for clean warfare, while somewhat exaggerated, contained elements of truth. For modern military historians, Rommel represents a fascinating study in leadership and command. His emphasis on reconnaissance, speed, and personal leadership remains relevant. His ability to inspire troops and maintain morale under difficult conditions offers lessons in military leadership. His tactical innovations in desert warfare influenced armored doctrine for decades. At the same time, Rommel embodies the moral compromises of serving an evil regime. His claim to have been just a soldier rings hollow given his close relationship with Hitler and his enthusiastic prosecution of Nazi Germany's wars of aggression. His eventual opposition came too late to absolve him of complicity in the regime's crimes. In the end, Erwin Rommel was a man of his time and circumstances. Born into Germany's military tradition, he pursued excellence in his chosen profession with single-minded dedication. His tactical genius made him one of history's great field commanders. His personal courage and leadership earned admiration across battle lines. But his service to the Third Reich, willing and enthusiastic for most of the war, stains his military achievements. The Desert Fox remains a figure of fascination precisely because of these contradictions. A brilliant tactician who struggled with strategy. A decorated hero who served a criminal regime. A legendary commander who died not in battle but by forced suicide. His story reminds us that military excellence cannot exist in a moral vacuum and that professional competence, however impressive, must ultimately be judged by the causes it serves. If you believe understanding these complex historical figures helps us learn from the past, this channel continues exploring the careers that shaped our modern world. The man who became a legend in the desert remains a symbol of both military brilliance and the dangers of placing duty above conscience.